Welcome to the Rant Live. Welcome to the Rant Live, a Chicago Bears webcast and podcast. We are coming to you live from undisclosed locations around the United States. And Evan Altman has what appears to be a bear on his head.
Rawr. Yeah, this is about as real a bear as what we saw last night. So
maybe that is more real than the bears we saw last night. What's the background on the headgear you got going on there?
I actually purchased this a few years ago for my son at Soldier Field. I was there for a Bears Dolphins game with some buddies. And it was really bad. It was a horrible. I mean, the Bears got beat. The Dolphins were really bad. And but it was cool. So we had gone to Ditka's before the game, and if anybody's ever been there, so in Chicago, I think is it 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. Maybe it's 9 there, and it was 10 for me because I'm on Eastern time. But we're there. You can't serve alcohol before a certain point, right? And if anybody's ever been at Ditka's, they got the famous Bloody Marys, and it's just a massive, like it's got like 2 jumbo shrimp and giant chunks of sausage, and it's this huge,
it's like a meal.
Yeah, it is. It's a full meal. And so, at about 9:45 or 8:45 or whatever the time is, they start lining because they take your orders. You can order them all. They just can't start serving them till that time. So about 15 minutes ahead, and the entire bar is just lined up with the glassware because they give you a beer back with it. So you got these giant Bloody Mary glasses with all these beer backs going. And then as soon as the clock hits, like everybody gets them. And so the whole place, which is like, I don't even remember how much that shit cost, but my goodness. So I just thought that was cool. I don't like Bloody Marys. I can't stand them. I don't like tomatoes or tomato juice or anything along those lines, but it was a really cool experience, right? And we did that and just stuffed ourselves on brunch and then went over the game and the Bears played like ass. So,
nothing new.
Yeah, it's pretty much exactly the same thing as what we're all used to. So, but that's where I got this. And then my son was wearing it yesterday before he got tired of it. So that was interesting.
Okay. Now, did he get tired of it because he just didn't want to wear it anymore, or was it just the Bears' performance that he just?
He kind of got he was smart and gave up real early on that. Partially because, and it was actually really cool, and I'm glad he did.
Drive.
He got one of these. It was. I should have given up long before I did, but he got a Nintendo Labo kit thing. They have multiples of these, and they're these cardboard, essentially puzzles, but you make them into actual devices of some sort that work with a Nintendo Switch. You hook your controllers up into it, and this one is a robot. So it's got like working. It's a backpack with hand grips and straps, and it's got these working straps. So you attach them to your feet, and then you play this game. And there's a robot on the screen, and as you move your feet, because it's got these strings on it and moves and stuff, then the robot on the screen moves, and you punch, and he punches. And
nice.
So he spent like 3 hours during the game, most of the game, actually making this thing all by himself. And so I said, you know what? He is doing something far more productive than I am by just getting mad. Like that's all I did. I was just like doom scrolling Twitter and yelling about how shitty the Bears were. So anyway, it was a much smarter decision. In fact, I'm going to make the smart decision to take this thing off because I can't put my headset on. Oh, look at my hair. That's why I wear a hat. Just do that. There we go.
Well, the good news is that the majority of our listeners actually come from the podcast, so no one can really see you. You now kind of look good. like I don't know I don't know all the names of the people on Star Wars, but the dude who wears the hood, who's like the real evil guy,
Darth Maul.
There you go. That's kind of what you look like now.
I'm just
scared.
Yeah, for anybody who's watching and you think I'm not paying attention, I'm partially not, but I'm also I'm retweeting the liveness of this out there. But it does sound like and I was looking and seeing, and I think it was an ESPN thing, but it does sound like Trubisky will get another chance to start. So we'll see. But anyway, I know we'll talk about that in more depth, but I just saw that as I was coming across.
We will. So yeah, I mean, I guess since we have to, we will talk about the game last night because, kind of what we do here. I mean, it's, to be honest with you, I didn't think that the offense played all that badly. I thought they actually played pretty well considering, I mean, I think Mitch did kind of what we expected him to do. I was really happy that he was hitting Mooney as much as he did. I think he distributed the ball better than we've seen Nick Foles distribute the ball. So I was happy with that. I think Montgomery looked great. I wish they would have had the opportunity to run the ball more. I think he could have gone for over 200 yards last night. So, I mean, on the offensive side of the ball, I wasn't unhappy. And I know that's kind of weird to say, given the level of expectation that I had, but it was really on the defensive side. And at the end of the day, listen, Akiem Hicks is the gel that brings this defense together. And without him, we saw, who did they play last week? The Vikings. I don't even remember who they lost to last week.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago. Because
2 weeks ago.
Remember, they were coming off the bye week. They had 2 weeks to prepare for the Packers. But anyway.
Yeah. And so Akiem Hicks left the game, I don't know, just after halftime, wasn't it? Against the Vikings. Whenever he left, there was a huge noticeable difference in the defense and their effectiveness against the Vikings once he left. I mean, it was day and night. And again, last night, the exact same thing. I mean, the Bears didn't pressure Chuck Pagano, whoever's making the call, Matt Nagy, I don't know. They did not pressure Aaron Rodgers at all. And I mean, you think in a game where you're going up against a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, it's not like he's just, his first year in the league. I mean, the guy's been around. You've got to be able to pressure him. And they had no pressure whatsoever. You don't have Akiem Hicks, so you can't rely on a 3-man, 4-man front. You got to bring some heat. And it just didn't happen. Aaron Rodgers was not hit once, and he was not sacked once. And that's embarrassing if you're the Bears.
Yeah, and for a team that relies on, like, if that was one of the keys to the game, right? They had to get to, and the thing is, he only threw for 211 yards. Right now, part of that is they got some fumbles, and they were able, they were in, as usual, the Packers were in pretty good field position, but to have 4 touchdowns on only 211 yards, and the fact that he wasn't intercepted, he was never sacked, he was never hit. And really, if we take it for, like, how many times was he even legitimately under pressure and had to move even in the pocket? Like, he had a clean pocket. He really didn't have to worry about anything, and he was able to hit his receivers cleanly in stride. And it was, I mean, it just obviously it made things. He spread the ball around. I mean, how many different guys? What, 3? Yeah, at least 5 guys had 2 receptions. So, I think 7 total receivers. Now, actually, the Bears did a pretty good job there too, though. Mitch spread it around fairly well, and a lot of those guys, like you mentioned, Kmet actually had a few targets, which is kind of incredible. Mooney had a few targets as well, and and that looked pretty good.
Mooney had 9 targets.
I think those were some of the
season
keys.
High for him.
Yeah, which isn't great that he only came down with 3 receptions out of that. Part of that's, Trubisky's just not very accurate, but among all those things, the 2 things to me that stood out, and this is one, and we knew this would be an issue coming into the game, is that not an issue in a good way, I guess, is that the Packers give up coming into the game 4.4 yards per rush. And so, and it was great that Montgomery was back, right? He was cleared from the concussion protocol. And that's when I wrote about that last week, was that, okay, this is great. Now, and I understand, part of that, you just had a guy coming off a concussion. You want to be a little bit careful there. But that was an area the Bears could have and did exploit, knowing that the Packers can move the ball, knowing that your defense is without Akiem Hicks and your offense can't score very well. They needed to be running the ball, commit to that run, eat up the clock, and keep the Packers offense off the field. However, David Montgomery got only 11 rushes, only 11 attempts. Trubisky had 3 and Cordero Patterson had 2. I mean, when you only run the ball 16 times, and they were running for, Montgomery got 103 yards on 11 rushes.
9.4.
Why are you
average.
not giving him the ball more? And I get that he's coming off of, he hadn't played in 3 weeks or whatever, but that's just unacceptable. You can't, that's an area where they easily, especially when you had Trubisky then throwing into double and triple coverage because they felt like they had to make these chunk plays when they got a 57-yard run from Montgomery. Like, you could have chunked plays from the running back. And they failed to do that. And that was just, although, they did use Montgomery really, really well in the passing game as well, right? He had 5 receptions. So, I mean, he was outstanding. But the fact, and this is where we've talked about the play calling all season long. I'll promise I'll shut up here in a second because otherwise I'll just keep going. But when you have something that works and and they were down so much, and I totally understand that they gave up a bunch of touchdowns early. They were down 27-3 or whatever at one point. But it felt like the same old Bears where they didn't score in the first quarter and they didn't get a touchdown in the first quarter. They got a field goal. No touchdown in the first quarter, which is I think that's their 21st or 22nd game, something like that, out of like 42, and then 48. And they did not score again in the third quarter. So the Bears scored more points in the fourth quarter Sunday night, 15 points, scored more points in the fourth quarter than they have scored in the third quarter all season. In 11 third quarters, they've scored 14 points, 7 of which came via Cordero Patterson kickoff return. That it's embarrassing. So you come off a bye. You had 2 weeks. You cannot score in the first quarter, other than you scored a field goal. So cannot score a touchdown.
Yep.
Cannot score at all in the third quarter. Again, coming off that break. This is a theme. Every fucking week we talk about this. That they're horrible in the first and the third. They're bad with preparation. That is the biggest indictment in the world to me. And then when you see freaking guys who have left the team, the tight ends that couldn't do anything with the Bears, that somehow couldn't play very well, out there scoring touchdowns with other teams, and it's so frustrating. And Rant, I'm done. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was a good one. I'll say this, and this is an indictment on Matt Nagy and why he needs to be fired. Is before the game, heading into the game, there was a lot of talk during the week, Matt Nagy emphasizing that the Bears needed to run the ball. I mean, I heard him say it multiple times in press conferences and interviews. So that was their strategy. They needed to run the ball. They go into this game, they win the toss, and they know they have Akiem Hicks out of the game. They know what no Akiem Hicks looks like for the Bears on defense because they had that second half against the Minnesota Vikings. So to me, if you want to run the ball, hold possession, and your defense is suspect, don't you take the ball and try to establish a drive in the first quarter of the game that leads to some points, preferably a touchdown. But anything that, to me, that was the biggest mind-boggling thing about any decision that Matt Nagy has made. Is he's going up, he's saying he needs to do something. It's clear that the Bears were able to run the ball, so he wasn't wrong in saying that they should be emphasizing the run. What he was wrong about was that they didn't take the ball and try to establish the run from the very beginning of the game. Instead, they gave the ball to the Packers, who held it for almost 8 minutes, drove down, scored a touchdown, and then repeated that, 2 more times. So their first 3 possessions were long drives. They held onto the ball for a long time, and they scored touchdowns on the first 3 possessions. And granted, the Bears scored some points, and their stats, they got, over 200 yards for Mitch Trubisky, over 100 yards for Montgomery. None of that matters, though, if you don't do what you say you're going to do. And what really is more maddening to me is not just that he didn't do what he said he was going to do, it was that if he would have done what he said he was going to do, it would have worked. Or at least it would have made him look like, somebody who knows what he's talking about and should be the head coach of a football team, not necessarily the Bears. So I think Nagy is absolutely clueless. I think he's lost. I think he's got to go. He needs to be a coordinator somewhere, but he's definitely not a head coach.
Yeah, and what was interesting is that, and they talked about this, and I wanted to yell at the TV. They talked about the play calling, right, and how Bill Lazor, the offensive coordinator, is taking that over, and how Nagy talked about how difficult that was for him and how it was his lifeblood. They talked about how he had gotten the opportunity to call plays under Andy Reid in Kansas City, but he had that opportunity taken back away from him by Andy Reid. So,
exactly.
And now we look, and again, we've talked about this. I've beaten this dead horse, but it's obvious that's not, at least in the role of head coach. And I think, again, you can't really put the head coach up in the booth, but I think Nagy would be better at it if he were calling plays from a different perspective. I have to say this every week. I don't think he does not visualize the game well from the sideline. And I know that, again, that's an indictment of him. That's a problem, right? So that's not an excuse. I'm saying he clearly does not. And I don't think his perspective of it is correct from there. But, between him and Ryan Pace, and that's like the least of the problems. I mean, Ted Phillips has got to go. I would prefer to see the McCaskies go ahead and sell the team. I mean, I think we can replace managers and general managers and coaches all over the place. But when you have a literal accountant, right? That's where Ted Phillips came from. He used to work at Ernst & Young before he came to the Bears. Then he was their controller, and then he was, and then he goes into a football kind of decision-making role.
Yeah.
But he's doing this he's the director of finance, or he was, but he's still operating a football team.
Hey, listen, I'm a finance guy and I'm doing like a podcast, and I feel like you're indicting me.
You've seen how shitty our podcasts are, so you should know this. No, we're operating 2 shitty websites, man. You know exactly what. But it's different, right? And
yeah, I mean, we're not a big, huge, we're not an NFL football team. It's not not quite as complicated.
Well, and there's a little bit of a difference here too, is that I've got the editorial control over it. You handle the business side. But Ted Phillips has control.
You're the quality control guy,
right? Exactly. I need the offensive quality control. Which the funniest thing about this weekend was that the Broncos, it wasn't funny that they had all their quarterbacks out because of COVID, but they actually petitioned the league to let their offensive quality control coach play quarterback for them in the game against the Saints before they had to go with like their 5th string practice squad guy. But anyway, when you have the whole thing they're doing, right? And so I wrote this up, and this is what I need to talk about. This is where the Bears are as an organization, and we need to be honest about this. We need to understand this. The Bears are if you stripped off the names and you don't look at like the history, if you just looked on paper at a few of these things, you said, okay, we're going to look at how much is the franchise worth? How much profit does the franchise make? What's their operating income, at least? And what has the team done in the last 18 to 19 years in terms of playoff success? And I tell you, one team has been to the playoffs 7 times and has won 6 games. This is from 1992 on. That team is worth $3.55 billion.
Okay.
And I don't have the operating income. I should have brought that up. The next team has been to the playoffs 6 times, has 4 wins in that time. They 4 playoff wins, right? They have a net worth or a value of $3.525, so just a little bit less, $3.525 billion. Then the next team has also been to the playoffs 6 times in that span with only 3 wins, and they are worth $3.5 billion. The Bears are one of those teams. Do you know what the other 2 teams are?
I do, because I read the article, so I'm not going to spoil it.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and spoil it then. It's the Jets and the Washington football team.
Yeah.
The Bears are, if you look at those, and during that time, mind you, let's go ahead and say, do you want to tell the listeners or the viewers what the Bears record is versus the Packers in that time, starting from 1992, so last 18 seasons? What's the Bears record versus the Packers in that time?
The Bears record are, I think hold on, I'm reading. It's very bad. Is it 14 and 43? No.
15 and 43. You can't
15.
take that win away from them. And
15 and 43.
Going into that, so prior to that point, heading into 1992, the Bears were 80, 57, and 6 against the Packers. Since that point, 15, 43, it's not good. So the Packers now have 100 wins versus the Bears. It's like 100. The Packers are up 100 to 95 with 6 ties. But I get where I'm looking at here, though, is the Bears are not like the Cowboys are way up there in terms of actual operating income. Like the Cowboys just make tons and tons of money. The Texans are actually way up there. I forget who else is who the hell else. Oh, the Patriots, of course. So there's only 4 teams that actually make more money than the Bears. Only 4 out of 32. But the Bears are on par with, if you look at Washington, that's a laughing stock of a franchise. They are poorly run. They're horrible. The Jets, laughing stock of a franchise. And yet, over the last 20 years, they are both as successful overall as the Bears. And they make as much money and they're worth as much. So why, I ask you, would the Bears, they have zero impetus. We're talking about ownership that allows Ted Phillips control. That is an accountant. Why would a man operating from a finance perspective, operating as an accountant, sit there and say, well, why would we spend all this extra money? Why would we try to do all these extra things? We are one of the most profitable franchises in the National Football League with among the highest value. I think the Bears are 6th. And I think the Jets are 5th and Washington's 7th, or it's either 5, 6, 7 or 6, 7, 8. Either way, why do anything different? We are very profitable. This is our family business. That but they are awful. So I'm not talking about the last 5 games. I'm not talking about this season or the last 2 years. I'm talking about the last 2 decades. The Bears are not a good organization. They are not being run to be a competitive organization because they don't give a shit whether they win or lose, because they're going to keep on cashing big ass checks because of the Bears.
So systemic problems, obviously, within the organization. And yes, I agree. I think the issue really is Ted Phillips. I think he's got to go. This has gone on for far too long, and it's always the same story, where you're putting people in position to make decisions, and they're just not getting the job done over and over and over again. And what Ryan Pace was a defensive guy, right? And I mean, let's look at the last, I don't have the list here of all the last few general managers for the Bears, but they're all defensive guys. So do you wonder why the Bears are always good on defense? It's because they don't have anybody who's really paying attention to the offense, except you get Nagy, a guy who was fired by Andy Reid, to come in and run your offense, and you scratch your head as to why you're not able to draft effectively and why you're not able to run a coherent offense in any way, shape, or form. And I think, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, this is the result that's going to continue to happen. The thing is that I think this season, more than any other, has really exposed, Ted Phillips and the organization that he's put together. And it's because of what we're talking about, where you're looking back 20 years in an organization and nothing has changed whatsoever. And this season is just a microcosm of that, where, for the longest period of time, the Bears were the worst, 1-0 team, 2-0 team, 5-1 team. And, and a lot of people like us and many other Bears fans were trying to defend that, to say, oh no, they're not the worst ever and all these things. But yeah, actually they were. And so that's kind of what it is. At the end of the day, we're going to need to see Ted Phillips gone. We're going to need to see Ryan Pace gone. We're going to need to see Matt Nagy gone. This is a full on tear down rebuild. The only problem is that you don't have someone like Theo Epstein, who came in on the north side to kind of clean things up, to do that here, because there's just nobody. I mean, is there anybody that you can think of that can come into Ted Phillips as the leader of the organization and do just a complete gut?
No, and that's the other concerning thing, is that, and certainly this isn't like if you're looking at this, it's not an immediate. And here's the other reason. So we've talked about this on here before too. If you're going to make wholesale change, like, now is the time to do it, because the team is, honestly, at this point, they're not. This is not a playoff team. It is not. It shouldn't be. If they make it there, they'll get embarrassed, and really don't want that. Because even if they lose out right now, they're only picking 14th. As bad as they look, they're still in the middle of the pack in the NFL. Yep. So 14th pick. Even if they lose out, there's 13 teams worse than them that conceivably could also lose. They can't all lose out, because the Bears got to play the Vikings are worse than the Bears. They got to play each other. but it's conceivable that the Bears could still end up with like the 15th or 16th or even 17th pick. And now what? Now you've got a shitty team with a cap that's set to drop about $25 million for next year. And now you're not making anything. So you need to make the change, because whoever's coming into this needs to be able to make some fresh decisions and kind of move some things around. But that, and therein lies the problem, right? So we just saw Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn, the coach and GM in Detroit. They were just fired after just an anemic, pathetic showing on Thanksgiving Day. They're out. The Jaguars already fired their GM. You know why these teams do this is because now they can get a head start on their search for these guys and try to go find the person they really want. When we look at the Bears, a lot of the hallmark of the decisions that they've made with their general managers and with other people in positions of power have been, whether it be Nagy, whether you can go back and look at a lot of their coaches they hire. These are not name brand guys generally. They're dudes who they can get for cheap. They're dudes who will go along with what Phillips wants and kind of, kowtow to him, which really is unfortunate. And I think we're going to see that again. If they fire, the Bears never fire anybody mid-season. It's going to happen late. If Phillips is still in control, they're going to go find some bargain basement, low-name guys who aren't going to command a bunch of money. And then they're going to be forced to operate with a strapped budget, maybe not even a great draft pick to start this whole thing out, and without a franchise quarterback. And that's the thing. We can go back to the other, why do they go deep? Because generally, defenses you can build a little bit cheaper. You can get lucky on a few guys. Stud offensive players, and the best defensive players, obviously, the best players in any position cost a lot of money. But you're not getting a good quarterback cheap. Right? That's not going to happen. You're not going out and you can draft a running back, maybe find it, but you can't go get a stud wide receiver on the cheap. And the Bears have been really cheap in a lot of those roles, other than, Mike Glennon, which is, and he almost led a freaking win. Speaking of the Jaguars,
I knew this
won
was
a damn
coming.
game for them. I mean, so it's unfortunate, but I just don't see it happening. And the McCaskies aren't going to sell, even if they could get $4 billion for the team, which would be a smarter thing to do. I mean, Virginia's 98 years old. She's not going to be around any longer. What's George going to do? Like $3 billion will, that'll set your family up for decades.
Yeah, you'll be good.
Just sell them. Stop being just cheapskates. This would allow you to stop being. But people, we were arguing about this with a lot of people last night. They're like, I don't, because somebody said just inept or what. I said, I don't think they care, and I don't mean that they are okay with losing. I just think they're perfectly fine making $136 million a year off this team. However, that's their operating income. So obviously that's not like all of that just gets funneled into ownership, but give it up, man. If you're not willing and able to put out a product that is suitable for the market, not only the market, but the fact that this is a marquee, is a premier franchise NFL founder. If you can't make that team, you don't need to be in the playoffs every year, but they're not good. They are among the dregs of the NFL when you talk about the last, we go since 85, but if you look at 85 to 91, they were actually somewhat competitive. Last 20 years are not at all, right? 20 to even go further. It's just gross, man.
It's what are the chances? I'm just going to throw something out there. What about Brian Kelly as head coach?
I don't think his style is a really good fit for the NFL. I like what he's done with Notre Dame, and I think he's been really, really good for them. But it's just not. I don't know if that plays.
Would you
I'm
have
not
to
sure.
bring,
Maybe so.
What about their Notre Dame's athletic director, Jack Swarbrick? Not as coach.
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, he's a lawyer
GM or president.
Oh, I mean that's possible.
You bring Swarbrick. You bring Kelly. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah. I mean,
it couldn't be worse than it is now.
Right.
You got some guys that regionally they fit really well.
Yeah. I mean, I think I just I'm not really sure. I know with Swarbrick, again, being an athletic director, even at a university like Notre Dame, I don't know how well that, but he is a football guy at least, and he understands the value of that. So, yeah, maybe.
Yeah. I'm just trying to be, kind of optimistic about something or find something that we can possibly be optimistic about because I know there's something out there. And so, where we start talking about Mitch Trubisky, like I said, I mean, there was nothing that he did that shocked me one way or the other. I think he distributed the ball a lot better than Nick Foles did. I think, as far as I'm concerned, Nick Foles, the experiment is done. If Foles could have led them to the playoffs, then you keep him in there. But at this point, I see no reason not to start Mitch Trubisky for the rest of the season.
No, I mean, and the only reason I would say to have Foles back in there is because I think they're actually worse with him.
Yeah,
and so I want them to lose at this point. There's no value in winning for them because they're not going to win out. And they're not like they're not going 10-6. I'll tell you that. But you need a mix of the two of them is the problem because it clearly the offense, at least at the point of attack, because Trubisky can just move. He just moves so much more smoothly and is able to escape the pocket if need be. That was pretty obvious. But his decision making is just brutally bad at times.
In the post-game comments where they asked Nagy about that interception, he kind of like almost admitted that was something that they just were going to, that's a play they were going to run right then at that moment. Not like it was a decision that Trubisky made. And so obviously Trubisky made the throw, but I kind of feel like that, they had the ball on Green Bay's 38-yard line. I thought that was just a terrible call if that was the call, versus Trubisky making a bad decision. I felt like it was the call. And I felt like that was on.
He's got to be able to come out of it. I mean, he threw into triple. The first interception was into double coverage. Then he threw into triple coverage. The one into triple coverage was even worse because Allen Robinson was coming across the middle again with it was a man defense, and the guy was behind him at that point. So a throw out in front of him gets him out in space, allows him to move a little bit. But this goes back to whether it was the call of decision. Trubisky's not great at making reads. We all know that. So it would make sense if okay, here's my first read. This is where I'm going. And he's made that decision. Or he just doesn't have the foresight to understand, he's zoned in and he doesn't see the other two men or three. I don't know. There were a couple of really bad plays. He's better suited for this offense than Foles, but Foles is a better quarterback. Pure quarterback.
Better kind of decision maker, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily a better thrower, not he gets rid of the ball quickly, but a little bit more quickly than Mitch does. And so maybe he's just a better decision maker.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. He doesn't have the athleticism. I don't think he's got, I don't think either of them has a great deal of quote unquote arm talent, compared to what maybe some of the other more elite quarterbacks are. But I do think, the offense looked like it was moving and functioning a little bit better just because you can get Trubisky out on a bootleg if you need to and kind of get a little bit more of that athletic look than what, and I think that does open up things a little bit for Montgomery, for some of the other guys. And Trubisky does seem to have a little bit more confidence or rapport with maybe Kmet, Montgomery out of the backfield, Mooney, guys like that. And so I again, those things I liked. But to me, that score, the Bears got 2 touchdowns in garbage time yet again, right? You look at the fourth quarter scoring, that's where a majority of their scoring has come. I think they've only scored 3 touchdowns. Excuse me, I think I saw this. 3 of their touchdowns this season only have come with the lead. Otherwise, the rest of their touchdowns have all been when they're behind.
And you could tell the Packers,
hey, they're good from behind, but they're not.
Yeah, you could tell the Packers weren't even trying last night if you were watching in the fourth quarter. I mean, they weren't on that 2-point conversion. Literally, they just stood there and let them get it. They were hardly even trying. They were going through the motions of kind of tackling a guy if he had the ball standing right in front of him, but they weren't really making an effort to break up passes, to just kind of do things. They knew it was over, and so any of the points scored in the fourth quarter, you're right, does not matter.
It's just at this point they're playing out the string. I am more interested now in seeing what they do as an organization. I am less concerned for what they do as a team on Sundays moving forward, just because I don't think that there's nothing we're really going to get out of this that's going to tell us a lot about Mitchell Trubisky. Is not going to suddenly emerge as the franchise quarterback, right? Nick Foles definitely is not going to. There's some things I think we'd see. Montgomery is a huge bright spot to me. I think Komet got a ton. One great. We've been calling for this. He didn't get targeted a lot more, but he got a lot more snaps than Jimmy Graham already, because Graham looks like he's just cashing checks at this point. Honestly, he's kind of there. He looks like he's going through the motions. I don't think he cares. I don't think he wants to be there. At least that's what it looks like from an observer perspective. But there are some things I think that we can look forward to in that regard. And rather than look at the overall performance, just look at, okay, hey, what can we get from some of these guys who will clearly be a part of this team moving forward? And then how does the organization build around them in whatever form that comes, whatever the front office or coaching staff looks like. But I would like to see a whole fresh perspective from the front office on down. And I really think that has to happen.
They may be stuck having to re-sign Mitchell Trubisky, and I know nobody wants to hear that, but it really depends, I guess, in terms of what happens, right, in the offseason, and if Pace gets fired and who else gets fired. But that might have to happen. They're not going to pay him a lot of money, but that's just something to keep in the back of your mind. Detroit Lions coming into the game. It'll be interesting to see if the Bears are favored. They're playing in Chicago against a team that is on paper worse, believe it or not. They haven't lost 5 straight. They've only lost 2 straight, so good on them. A team that really should have beaten the Bears in, was it week 2?
Yes.
When the guy dropped
the touchdown. Yeah.
Like on the one, like literally wide open, dropped the touchdown. So one of those wins the Bears shouldn't have had. So it'll be interesting to see. I like the Bears. If they get Akiem Hicks back, I feel good about their defense. But without Hicks, it's just nothing's going to get better there anytime soon, unless we start seeing more of an effort from guys who are veterans. And it kind of feels like they're losing kind of some, spirit, so to speak. Their spirit is being crushed by the offense. So, but it's a good opportunity for you play Mitch Trubisky, and like you said, he's getting the younger guys involved, and so you could see him kind of start to gel maybe a little bit, hopefully make some better decisions, which we know is not going to happen. Why do I even say that?
It won't.
But so I don't know. It doesn't really matter, but at least at the end of the day, this should be a competitive game. The Bears shouldn't get blown out by the Lions. It's a game they should win. So I guess that's positive. Maybe they go to 6-6. What do you think?
At this point, you talk about, again, I think the Lions, the best example the Lions set was that they fired their coach and GM.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see there. Does that mean sometimes we see that and teams will do this and they'll kind of, they wanted those guys go on themselves. And so then they step up for this new coach who came in, and they're kind of playing.
He's the offensive coordinator. So if anything, their offense is,
which is really generally their bread and butter with Matthew Stafford back there. They've got some weapons, but maybe they come out and one of two things. I don't think you're going to see Detroit do the same thing. They're either going to be flat and look even worse, or they're going to come out with that chip and really try to do something big and just kind of stick it to Matt Patricia. But again, I don't see anything from the Bears that leads me to believe that they should be the favorite against almost any team, save maybe the Jets, right? So we'll see. Does Detroit get pissed off? Do they care? Are the Bears healthy? I don't know. I think we see Trubisky again. I would love to see them kind of commit to the run and just stick with that and kind of try to keep the defense rested and, keep the Lions offense off the field, but we'll see.
All right. Well, we'll see how that works out. Hopefully it leads to a good result and we can actually have something positive to talk about next week. Nice. Hey, maybe during the week they'll fire Pace and Nagy too. So then we'd really have a lot.
Just two.
If they do that, we're having a show that day.
Yeah. Chaos.
I'm going to commit to that.
Bring it. Full chaos. I love it.
You know, I will say that. So to me, you know, got Bears Insider that we just started, and we have Cubs Insider that's kind of like our established brand. And the Bears kind of thing just kind of feels more of like it should just be kind of a fun hobby type thing. And it is, except that it's not really all that fun right now.
They're not holding up their end of the deal.
Yeah.
It's not fun. Like that I would like them to change it, but at least again, at least as my favorite word of the day clearly is chaos, but at least that would be fun and different. And then I'm not just bitching about the same stuff literally every week. So, so we'll see. I would honestly be able to watch with less anxiety if that were the case, instead of just being angry or frustrated or whatever. So
to know there's at least definite change in the future.
Right. Like something is going to change, and whatever that is at least exciting and interesting to kind of speculate versus watching this and saying, I feel like this is the same thing I've seen for the last 20, 30 years. Because I realized my math was bad. It's actually 30 years that they've been bad, not just 20. But that doesn't help, right? That doesn't make it feel better. But we'll see. I mean, there are, again, I'm going to just shift my focus to looking more at little things and kind of targeting some of those players and plays maybe that are the building blocks for what could happen in the future. And I'll just try to limit my anxiety by doing that.
Yep, I agree. Okay, well, that's all for us today from our undisclosed locations in bunkers. We are John and Evan. We are the Rant Live. See ya.
Lighters.